Hello and welcome to Fire in the Belly. Today we have myself, Mighty Pete, and we have the Dan Mangena. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, sir.
All of the things. I received them all. We're moving across timelines and receiving all of the greetings,
Well,
and I send them back to you.
that's what it's all about. So we're
Exactly.
anytime, any place, anywhere, so that's what it's all about.
Exactly.
Dan,
Yeah.
tell us, who are you? Who have we got on the show today?
Dan, I produce film. That's the big thing. But we started moving to back end of last year. I've got my first documentary, which intending to finish the cut and score of it by the end of Jan to get that out. I've written a few books. I podcast like yourself, and I do some speaking. That's generally what I do on a day-to-day basis.
So under the hood, then, what are you? I'm hearing creator. Is that fair? Is that
You know what? And I think a lot of people that get to sort of this sort of age, I just turned 39. I've gone through different phases where I was like, I know exactly what I'm doing. Like I was strictly an entrepreneur for many, many years. I would say I was hard into the coaching thing for a couple of years, although I've navigated a bit away from that. I've got a team that do most of the coaching in the coaching business. And now I'm kind of like just sharing stuff with people. I'm very blessed that from a business side of things, I've got a decent portfolio of income streams. So I don't really have to chase a coaching client or sell a program. That's not something that I need to do. I generally just do the stuff that makes me feel good, that adds something of value to the world. And I'd say that's what I do. I'm someone that likes to add value to the world.
so? Where's your zone of genius then, Dan?
I would say creative problem solving is definitely big on the list. A lot of what I do from the entrepreneurial side of things isn't so much the day-to-day operations thing, but is there a problem in the world that needs to be solved? Can I bring together the people and resources to solve that problem and organize them in a way that, honors the law of profit? Really, that's what I do. I attribute a lot of that to my Asperger's, the way that my brain works. I do tend to see things and find where the gaps are and be able to solve problems in things quite easily. That's definitely a zone of genius for me. But I also, I would say I'm good at seeing a vision for something beyond what it is right now. It could be that I see the gaps in, some things potential, but definitely seeing the gaps for a future vision and solving the problems that get us to where we want to be from where we are today. That I would say is definitely a zone of genius for me.
Mm. And am I like what I'm hearing there? So you're very good at taking a problem and solving, because I know some people like to work with a blank canvas and they go out and do their own thing and whatever. As other people are sort of fixer doers, creators, right? So I'm hearing kind of you take a problem, then you play with it, retweak it, reinvent it, whatever, right? Is that a fair?
Yeah, I would say so. I do have capacity for what do they call organic creativity. I do make music, I write poetry and all that kind of stuff as well. But I would say in terms of value add, not just for personal enjoyment, I am better and I think more effective and have more contribution from the synthetic, aka something's there that can be improved, something's there that needs something, or something's there that could be something else. That's definitely from a business perspective where I tend to play.
So when we're looking creative problem solving, we're getting down into the room. When do we get down out of the room?
When the problem's solved. Sometimes, one of my companies is a consultant company. We do have a team of experts that can work on the execution and the operational side of things, but that's not really me. I don't really enjoy that part of the process at all. But certainly, even down to the coaching now, the only coaching I really do personally, and not the team, is having someone come and sit with me for a day, 2 days. They've got a clear idea on where they want to go, or a clear idea on where they want to get a clear idea towards. We get that done, we get the plan together, and then we pat them off to go and execute. I'm not the person that's going to be there, every week for a year, coming back to, let's do a follow-up on the execution of this problem. I'm not that guy. I can do it, but I don't enjoy it. And at the end of the day, when we're creating our own life, Pete, why would we create one that we don't really enjoy?
And that's key, right? Because we do sort of saying, well, if I offer a coaching, then I have to do this, this, and this, and this. And as soon as we've used the word have to, that's a problem, right? Because as you say, if it's business as usual and you're getting bored and you're not in your zone of genius, then you're more likely to wreck something than create something. Right?
Exactly. Or to create something that just doesn't fill you up. And I think a lot of people, especially getting to, this sort of age, they call it middle-aged, midlife, whatever. So I was just laughing about this. My nephew, quick tangent, my nephew's just turned 17 and he's starting his driving lessons. And I remember him being 4 months old sitting on my lap. My son's just turned 2. and I'm freaking out about the prospect of that. And then I think about my poor parents. probably still remember bringing me back home from the hospital, and I'm going to be 40 this year. So, but yeah, when we get to this age, I think a lot of the time we are, if we're aware enough, starting to tune into the things that we have been doing that don't work for us, the things that we have been doing that do work for us. And I think when we look at like the midlife crisis and people starting to get that itchy, the itchy foot, itchy hand syndrome, it's maybe because they don't have enough of a conscious role in that conversation that's happening. And so they end up being pulled away. It can lead to frustration. We get people that get work dissatisfaction, people taking drastic actions like going off and trying to find fun away from home, all the work. But I think if you just bring a level of awareness to it and just tune into, hang on, that doesn't really feel great when I do it. That feels excellent when I do it. And then start to apply some agency and taking action on the back of those awarenesses, I think life can start to move in a much more positive direction going forward.
I like that. I mean, you talk about losing consciousness. I mean, when or how do people lose consciousness about their own path or their own passion, if you like?
Yeah, I would actually say that for the most part, from my own experience, I mean, I've been in personal development now for more than 20 years. I started reading books like Think and Grow Rich when I was 16, right? And so I've been in different communities, been in different workshops, rooms, and seen people from all walks of life now for 2 decades. And I would say that it's not so much people lose it, it's people don't take up the opportunity to step into consciousness about things. When you think about the way that we're groomed, if you will, as humans in modern Western society, at least, we're not actually trained to be conscious. We're trained to be good worker bees. The education system is based on the old Victorian workhouse system. We sit in rows, they ring a bell, they tell us when we can eat, when we can go to the toilet. They prolong that with extended education. Then we're trained to be good worker bees and go out into the workforce, pay our taxes and wait until retirement. So at no point in that is there anyone or at any point in the journey that says, hey, bring some consciousness, bring some awareness to what you're creating, what you're doing. It brings some effectivity to what you're creating for the sake of the greater good, whether it's your society, your government, your workplace, or your family. We're not really taught to actually look at our own needs, really, for the main part, I don't think.
What do you think now would be the sort of the KPIs? What's the key performance indicators here of what you should look at in a successful life? What are the boxes we're ticking?
So I like to invite people to follow the sexy, right? And does it feel yummy to you? Do you feel alive? Like when you wake up in the morning, are you looking forward to the day that's ahead of you? Are you looking forward to being back in bed at the end of the day? Whether that's in terms of your relationships, your friendships, your career, your hobbies, or any of the above, or all of the above. Does it feel sexy to me? Am I excited about it? Am I jazzed up about it? Do I want to go and do it? Or am I doing it from a sense of obligation, or because if I don't go to work today, I'm not going to be able to pay the bills, or, if I don't show up in this relationship, nobody's going to be able to do the dishes for me? Like, what's driving you? And is that driver something that excites you, or something that doesn't make you feel very full at all?
And what does sexy look like in people, do you think?
I think everyone's going to feel sexy in different ways, right? There's a really cool test that we use with our money blueprint, money DNA, teaching, which is the erotic blueprint. And people get really weirded out, like, why do you want to know if I'm kinky or not? Like, what's this got to do with anything? But
sexy, erotic. I'm starting to see a trend here.
Like, so it's it. No, but honestly, it's like when you think about it, like I deliberately use the word sexy because the act of sexual intercourse has the energy in it to create life. So when we're creating, we need that level of energy in order to bring something forth that wasn't there before. That's literally the case for bringing forward new life. When we're looking at bringing forward a new life for ourselves, if we don't have that energy, that sexy energy behind it, then the probability of that thing being created drops significantly. In nature, that's how things are created, through intercourse and through the energy that sparks at that point. What the erotic blueprint shows us is that we all access, experience, feel, and engage with sexy energy in different ways. So, for example, my primary blueprint is energetic. The way something feels is more important to me. Someone who's more of a kink is going to be more, how edgy does it feel? That's when it's going to feel sexy to you. For someone that's more sexual, it's how carnal, how raw and hot does it feel? But we're all going to connect with it in different ways. We're not cookies coming out of a cookie cutter. We're all individuals. And when we can understand that and get to know ourselves enough, we can start to relate to that feeling of sexiness in a way that works for us, bring that into our life more, and create more of what we want.
How many people in life do you think get to sort of feel that sexy? I mean, how common do you think it is?
On a regular basis, I'd say it's very low. You could even look at the statistics in terms of the people that do actually live life on their own terms. You know, you get the whole thing of the 1%, the 3%, the 5%, the 10%, you know, all those kind of numbers. And then you've got the fact that I think they've calculated that 80% of us operating on a negative bias. Most of the time we're playing defense, we're looking at what's not working rather than what is working. So even if we look at those raw numbers, you know, 80 or 90% of us are not living life on our own terms. Even if you start to look at the happiness quotients that they can do, a lot of researchers do stuff into that. Look at the number of people that are living in debt. They're wage slaves. You know, how can we be living life on our own terms if we don't have the resources? The biggest cause of families breaking up is financial strain. So if we've got these measurable indicators that are showing how many people are playing in a sandpit that probably isn't going to be one that's empowering, then we start to get quite a scary look at the number of people that probably aren't living life in the sexy zone.
Just break that down for us. I think that's a really powerful point. I mean, that negative bias that most people are living by, how does that negative bias serve them? Because it has to serve them some way, right?
I mean, from an evolutionary psychology perspective, our brain is hardwired to look for what could go wrong so it can protect us, because the function of the mind is to keep us safe. And so it's looking for danger. So, oh, that might be dangerous, that might be dangerous, that might be dangerous. But we're no longer walking with saber-toothed tigers, right? So the quality of the thing that we find to be dangerous or to be negative changes. And of course, that's being seen through the lens of our experience. So for someone who's had a bad experience with romantic relationship, for example, someone coming up to ask them on a date would be dangerous. They'll be viewed negatively and as a risk. And so anything of that nature, someone who's had trauma around a friendship, for example, anytime someone seeks to come and create friendship with them, they're going to have that. So again, this is where the consciousness really comes in, because yes, it is imperative that our mind continues to fulfill its function of looking for what might go wrong. But it's important for us to have a conscious relationship to what we consider to be going wrong, so that the brain isn't filtering out all of these things that actually could go right, or even defending us from things that aren't as bad as we think that they might be.
So it's survival, if I'm hearing that right.
Yeah, survival.
Or perceived survival.
But too many people. Well, perceived survival, yes, but because again, the fight or flight that we needed to have the capacity for when running away from saber-toothed tigers is very different from dealing with a bully at school, or a bully in the workplace, or a boss that isn't empowering, or a relationship that doesn't make us feel good. And yet we're still having the same physiological response, the same stress response in the body. And when we're not dealing with that, well, I mean, like if we look in nature, animals tend to shake things off and so on and so forth. We don't have that function. And so we end up just carrying that in the body. And that's what leads to a lot of illness and so on and so forth.
And that's kind of coming back to almost like a knowing yourself type thing, isn't it? It's knowing when you are in the good zone, knowing when you're in flow, knowing when you're in survival mode, right? So that's key, right?
100%. And that's where like what books like The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle are really, really good, because they get us to understand that we're probably not going to be tuned in all of the time. But if we spend enough time knowing what it feels like to be tuned in and not tuned in, we can at least start to make some course corrections when we do drastically go off course, and try at least keep ourselves in a healthy bandwidth of being tuned in most of the time. And even when we fall out of tune, not so badly out of tune that we start to move into disempowering states, start to move into deep stress, cortisol getting produced in the body. So many illnesses that we're experiencing today are attributed to stress and stuff like that. The mental health epidemic that we're seeing happening in the workplace and in teenagers. How many teenagers committed suicide over the last couple of years, and someone just from stress? So if we start to bring some awareness to that, I think we could start to combat some of the impacts it's having negatively on us as a society.
Because we're in a weird state right now, aren't we? Really, there's so much going on. Why do you think that is? I mean, I know it may sound like an obvious question, but why?
You know, you get the conspiracy theorists that say, you know, the cabal's trying to control the world by keeping people in a negative place. But I mean, there's always been people with power and people without. The dualism is one of the most insidious and yet persistent truths of the way society has worked. I went on to this. I'm in the Middle East at the moment, in the UAE, and went to this little place called the Heritage Village yesterday, where they showed what it was like in the old days before they had all the oil and they were just, you know, diving for pearls and whatnot. And what it showed was that even back then, there was still the have and the haves not. There were still the leaders that had, and the way that it works here in the UAE at the moment is you get a hierarchy of families. Now, everybody that's a national, because I think 80% of the population here is expats and people that are worker migrants. 20% of the population are nationals, and the nationals all get a piece of the government's wealth, like the money that they make with oil and all that kind of stuff, tax revenues. It gets distributed amongst the people, but it's only distributed amongst the nationals. And so all that's happened now is that the have and the have-nots have shifted. It used to be the royals had and everybody else didn't have. And now everybody that's national's got on the up, and the rest of us are just here to visit and work don't have. So this thing of this hierarchy and this separation between people has always been there. There's always somebody that's going to be looking for personal gain. I think it's Adam Smith that said it's not from the benevolence of the baker and the butcher that we get our bread and our meat, but from their own self-interest. Everybody is at some level looking out for their self-interest. Just sometimes self-interests happen to be of contribution to others. I do what I do because I love doing what I do. If I didn't do it, I wouldn't do it, even though it does benefit others. I'm not doing it primarily because it benefits others. I'm doing it because I want to do it. I derive a sense of pleasure from being the person that I am. And so when we look at that, we can start to pull away from the conspiracy-based thing and just look at people are just doing what's in their interest. And other people's interest isn't necessarily going to align with yours. But if you focus on having a conscious relationship to yourself and the pursuit of your own interests and the people that you're responsible for, like family and so on and so forth, then it doesn't really start to matter so much what other people want to create around you. It starts to actually become more impactful what you're creating for yourself.
How important do you think it is to support those around you? I mean, I know it sounds a bit obvious, and some people, for some people, it's, it is the family and taking responsibility, but there's an element of it goes both ways too, right? It's like, how much do you support your family and how much should your family support you? Does that make sense?
I think mutual benefit is a really powerful thing to remember, that community, people coming together with a common goal is really, really impactful. It's really, really powerful. So actually, if we start to find people that have got common interests, then that community-based approach actually serves everyone. If everyone's contributing to a community-based effort, we can all move forward. Now, as a family unit, you would hope that for most of us, we can start to build family units that do have common interests or common values as a family that we can start to move forward for. But even when you look at the selfish interest as a parent, at some point we're going to need the kids to look after us, right? So do a good job of teaching them to be loving, caring people that actually have a relationship with you. They're probably going to do a better job of looking after you when you need it. I always wonder if my parents had so many of us just to make sure they were hedging their bets. like, there's got to be at least one in there that's going to look after us. And I was always laughing and joking that although I've got a son now, I reckon I want to have a couple of daughters. They're probably going to be a bit better at looking after their dad, because my son's probably going to be concerned about looking after his mum. But yeah, if we build a relationship to the idea of collaboration and common goals, we'll start to see more potent, powerful movement towards goals together than we will trying to strive in opposition with others or indeed by ourselves.
What is there a set of values, core values, soul values, whatever you choose to look at it? Is there a certain set that you live by? Because I mean, you've mentioned a couple of things there. Obviously, you're doing what you love, supporting, helping, and interacting with others as well. There, or I mean, is there a set of a manifesto or something underneath that you live by?
Yes, there is. But what I want to preface that is I'm always open to that to change.
Okay.
Right. I think sometimes we can become so dogmatic with a commitment to a set, this is my list, I must follow this list forever. Then when we get new data, when we get new information, when we get new experiences, we don't actually allow those to grow with us. And so we actually end up stagnant, and that stagnance actually stops us moving forward. Versus I have values, yes, and I interrogate them every single morning. Literally every morning I say, are those still the things I care about? And the way that I actually connect with those values is, how do I want to feel? And I've got 5. And those 5 that I want to feel, I'm always open to seeing, do those still feel good in my body against what's happened yesterday, what I've learned up until this moment? And am I still excited by those 5 emotions being the thing that's going to drive me going into my day? Right now, those are being at peace with myself, freedom, play, generosity. Those are core ones for me right now. And as I sit with those every morning, and then I look through my day ahead. So do the things in the course of my day support those, or do they not? And then as I'm going through my day, I can say, well, am I finding it challenging, or am I finding it easy to feel those emotions today? And I can also start to interrogate myself and say, well, am I still excited about the life tomorrow that may include these, or is there something happened today that's going to lead to a change? And that's something I do at the end of the day with my journal practice also.
Interesting you bring in the sort of the kinesthetic side here, you know, saying, how do I feel about this? Is that a, is that a guiding light for you? Is your feeling as opposed to other senses?
Well, I think we need to remember that at the end of the day, regardless of anything, life is experienced through the body. And so if we're not bringing a conscious relationship to what we're feeling and the body that's actually going to be having the physical experience, there's going to be a disconnect. That means that we're not going to be fulfilled. You know, so many people are chasing goals that are just cognitive, or they're just visionary, but there's no actually in-body relationship to it. And so they get to the end goal, they win the lottery, they get the promotion, they get the boy or the girl that they were after, and there's still an emptiness. It's because there was no real connection to it. It was a purely mental experience. And when they do have the physical experience, even if it does have an in-body relationship in there, there's no connection, and so there's a lack of fulfillment.
So and I'm sort of maybe jumping ahead here, because there is,
Mhm.
well, I'm going to bring in some of your books here, because you've 5 books of, by my reckoning, 5 or 6 books. What I'm seeing there is, well, to give people a quick introduction, I suppose, the Dreamer's Manifesto is one,
Mhm.
Money Game, From
Mhm.
Time to Time,
Mhm.
Stepping Beyond Intention,
Yeah.
and Proximity of Power.
Yeah, power proximity, I've just got a guest chapter in there, but that does actually speak. The guest chapter that I've got in there, it's a very interesting book. So my mentor, Greg, he's a monster when it comes to creating books, and he's got a really interesting approach to it. He always uses a fictional story to illustrate a point. And then what he's done a couple of times is he's allowed some of us to bring ourselves into the story as characters in the books to actually give some advice to someone on their journey. And so that's the way that we get to communicate the gift of what we want to share with the world. And so the gift, the nugget that I shared in the power of proximity is my teaching, reality wraps around how you feel. And what that really follows on from is the concept that our emotional state leads to what we can think, our think leads to our actions, and our actions and behaviors lead to our life.
Mm.
Hmm.
That's interesting. You think that for you, the thinking comes first, thinking, action, state.
So we have the unconscious mind is operating at 10,000 to 10 million times the speed of the conscious mind and generating inputs that we experience in our body. People call it vibe, frequency, but ultimately that measurable thing we experience most cognitively as an emotional state. That then leads to the landscape of the thoughts that continue to run. Our unconscious thoughts are operating our actions and behaviors as much as 90% of the time, some of us even more. And so what's happening is everything that we're doing on an everyday basis is happening from something that's being processed at 10,000 to 10 million times the speed of our ability to consciously keep up with it. There's an emotional state that's leading to a thinking environment, that's leading to actions and behaviors, that leads to a physical environment that reinforces or disrupts those thought patterns happening anyway, those programs happening anyway, and creates either a vicious loop or a positive loop, but there's always a loop happening. We can disrupt the loop, but we can't control the loop. And a lot of people get frustrated trying to control it instead of disrupting it and moving it in a new direction.
So when you're saying, you know, really, and you talk about there sort of really sitting down and trying to understand, you know, how do I feel about that? So is that, that's a method, is that like a sort of a conscious mind bypass method or something, you know, to try and say, take away the thinking and the knowing bit, the words, let's get past the words. How does this make me feel? How does this resonate with me?
Because at the end of the day, the feeling is the first engagement that we're going to have with whatever's going on inside of us. The feeling is going to come first. Now, because the thoughts are happening so quickly, by the time we've even looked at the thought and tried to interrogate and see how we think about it, we're already on to another, God knows how many tens of billions of thoughts that have already run through. But how I feel right now is an indication of what's going on. And we'll find that because the brain works generally in rhythms and patterns, we're going to have a consistency happening somewhere under the hood as to a common thread feeling that's going on. We may have movements away from that and into other things, but generally speaking, there's going to be a common thread happening with the feeling. When I can start to identify that, I can see what's going on in terms of the quality of the program underneath. When I start to disrupt that and move that somewhere where I constantly want to go, I can start to change the quality of my life overall, because again, that's going to lead to the quality of my thoughts, quality of my actions, and therefore the quality of my outcomes.
And do you monitor that loop? You know, sort of is my output matching my input?
So what we do instead is instead of trying to monitor the loop, we get intentional. That's what my book Stepping Beyond Intention is all about. We get intentional about the feelings and the outcomes. And so what we do is we reverse engineer through a visualization process most of the time. When I look at myself, when I see myself in the vision of what I want to create, how does it feel for me to be in that vision? Because at the end of the day, Pete, how you're going to feel in a vision is going to be different to how I'm going to feel, because you're going to have a different set of cognitive relationships between feeling and experience. And so we want to get into a personalized thing. And we do that by simply saying, if I see myself in the vision of me having the relationship I want, having the job that I want, driving the car that I want, living in the house that I want, going on the holiday that I want, if I see myself in that vision, how does that feel in my body if I project myself there now? And that's it. Those are the GPS coordinates of the feelings that you want in order to generate the snowball effect into it. And then we focus on creating an environment that supports me feeling those emotions. If I'm feeling those emotions, my thoughts are going to match, my habits and actions are going to match, and the probability of me getting there increases exponentially.
I mean, I really think that's a huge point that so many people miss. You know, they go and they goal set based on what they know today, you know, and based on what the neighbor says or whatever. I mean, these goal setting workshops, we've just come into a new year, all the rest of people set goals. What did you write in your list? Oh, I'm going to make 10 million this year. Okay, I'm going to make 12 million this year. And it's like, okay, that's all done with the conscious mind. But as you're saying there, it's like actually visualizing your future intention and setting your goals based on your future self is massive.
Because there's a personalized relationship there.
Yeah.
And I think, again, when we go into people trying to keep up with the Joneses, people going into depression and all these other mental health issues because they're chasing something outside of themselves, they're running after something that they don't have a cognitive connection to. So that, again, we get that in-body disconnect. So even if they do get there, they're not going to feel fulfilled. They're not going to feel happy. They're going to feel empty because it's not your goal, it's somebody else's. You know, when I first started coaching back in 2018, and one of the things I was coaching people on was the midlife crisis. And the reason why is because I found that my model for Beyond Intention and the Ideal Life Blueprint was great for people starting afresh, anew, whether it was midlife crisis, coming to career change, people moving into retirement or whatever. It's having that blank slate and wanting to have a model to create something conscious against the backdrop of it. And time again, when we were working with people on the midlife crisis aspect, is people have spent 15 to 20, you know, sometimes more years chasing after something and then realizing at the unconscious level, this isn't even what I bloody want. I don't care about having a white picket fence. I don't want to be in a monogamous relationship. I don't like kids. Why did I bring them into my body and birth them out of me, you know? And then that starts to create, again, because they haven't got the conscious relationship to it most of the time, reactive responses of, oh my God, I need to go and have an affair. Oh my God, I need to go and buy a Harley Davidson and drive around the country, whatever, versus, okay, cool, that's what I've been doing up until now, but what do I want to create? How do I want to feel? What do I want my life to look like going forward?
And it's really interesting. So when we're looking at the actual conscious reaction to something, or either the actions that we've taken, to then do a bit of a self-analysis check on it, to say, as you say, right, you know, I'll lose the plot, I'll go buy a Harley Davidson, nothing wrong with buying one, but it's kind of got much intention, you know, if it's a complete overreaction to a previous underreaction or whatever else. You know, I suppose how is it through looking at your feeling, or what's my intention here? What is it that we're actually looking at so people can start to self-diagnose where they currently are as to where they could be or should be, or ultimately their sort of true purpose is?
And that's where follow the sexy comes in. Like, what feels sexy? I define desire as, and people can interchange whichever word they want to do, universe, source, God, whatever. But what is that thing? I define desire as that thing trying to speak something to you. So it's the heart speaking to you what the divine source, God, whatever wants to speak through you. There's always something that we're being called to. But for a lot of us, we have that smothered as a younger person, and we're told that it's not possible, or we allow life to beat us down. We start chasing other people's desires instead of our own. We get that disconnect. But if we start to tune in, and it's a very, very simple course of questions you can ask yourself, like, if anyone who's listening to this, as long as they're not driving a car or operating heavy machinery or watching small humans, if you just close your eyes and just ask yourself, in this moment, what the dickens would feel just amazing to you right now? And of those things that have come up, which of them do not impede other people doing what feels amazing to them, the sexy for them too? And then what could you do right now to start to move closer to any of those things that meet those two tests? And if you have a life that's consistently every day, you're saying, hey, what feels good and does no harm today? That's the simple question. What feels good and does no harm? What feels sexy and doesn't impede other people being sexy too? How can life not be cool if you're following that course of questions?
Mm. So true.
It's like when people start to talk about purpose and, oh, what's my purpose? What am I here to do? What about if you just ask yourself that series of questions on a regular basis and followed the thread of where they went?
It's, I mean, it's so powerful, and in its simplicity. Yeah, people overestimate or underestimate it because of its simplicity, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We're looking for the secret
It's just
formula.
two questions.
Or
And you know, one of my keynote talks is the pointlessness of purpose. And people get really upset with me when I say that combination of words. Pointlessness of purpose? What do you mean? Purpose saved my life. Purpose is the most important thing. And yet, if you spend your entire life searching or hunting down this purpose, when do you actually get the time to live life, which really is what we're here to do? Right? You spend a year hunting down this magical, mythical purpose. What's happened with that time? Now, some people may have a fulfilling journey searching for purpose, but for those of us that aren't, what's really going on? Versus what's my purpose for today? What's my purpose right now? Again, the flexibility of being open to things changing.
well, what for you is more powerful, chasing and sort of finding the thing that you are, or eliminating things that you're not?
I would say neither of them. I'd say living life is the most important thing. And living a life that at the end of the day, I mean, I love the film What Dreams May Come, where one of the premises underneath is essentially we create our heaven or our hell based on, you know, our perspective on things. And although I was raised in quite a conservative Christian household, I probably think that's probably closer to the truth as to what the afterlife or anything that is. I believe it's a journey of consciousness through the sum of our choices in this lifetime and creating new levels of experience based on that. It's the power of thought, in my opinion. But I won't know until pop my clogs. But ultimately, if we spend our life taking actions and engaging in activities that actually have us feeling uplifted, it doesn't matter whether that includes chasing after something that makes us feel good or releasing things that don't make us feel good or that we're not. What matters is, what is the feeling that we're experiencing at the end of the day? What's the quality of life that we're experiencing at the end of the day? And what expectations and future pacings is that leading us in going forward?
Mm. Would you, I mean, sort of almost intuitively, would you be sensitive to other people when they're in their sort of purpose or in their sort of their own zone of genius, if you like? Because I know, you know, sometimes, especially if you are in flow or anything else, being around those that aren't, or also running very negative patterns, do you find yourself susceptible to who's around you and what's going on, or intuitive, or
Yeah.
you just sort of maintain your own focus and walls?
But I'm ruthlessly curative of my environment, Pete, like ruthlessly, as in, I don't really care what role society says that you have to play in my life. If you are not adding positively, if you're draining and pulling away from me moving towards where I'm moving, then I'm not really into it. And it's the same, like I'm open to other people saying that to me as well, though, right? You know, I could have a friend for 50 years. If they like, sorry, dude, like you're not really grooving with where I'm at right now. Fair, you know, fair dues, you know, that's that. So I'm not attached to those things. What I'm attached to is, are we in collaboration? Does our energy put together actually add? Because if it's pulling away from me, it's probably not adding to you either. It might be feeding into a program that makes you feel like it's adding to you. So what energy vampires make me laugh, because they're not filling themselves up. They're still empty too. And they're probably reinforcing the emptiness by them trying to chase or pull energy from other people. So we're not actually serving each other. So I'm actually not just doing myself a service, I'm also doing you a service by releasing you from my experience also, because neither of us were being served by us being in any relationship anyway.
Is people pleasing one of the key things that sort of people do as a method of energy input?
I think people pleasing, in my experience, witnessing it and also being a people pleaser at different points in my life, really we're trying to fill a hole within ourselves by filling a hole in someone else. So we're running away from feeding ourselves by trying to feed into other people, or we're seeking something outside of ourselves to fill a gap within ourselves. And none of those approaches are going to work. And so when I find myself slipping into any kind of pattern, even resembling people pleasing, I start to look at what's missing from me and start to try and find a way to fill that up.
I mean, would you be quite conscious of your energy levels, what's going on, who, you know, and how you're feeling and needing to take time out, or, you know, sort of rebuild yourself, fill your cup up again, so to speak?
Well, that's part of my daily practice, but I put the work in to be able to do that. I've got my morning practice, I've got my evening practice, I've got something I do called check-ins that we teach our guys to do as well, where you just stop at regular intervals in the day. And it doesn't have to be a set time, it can be after an activity, when you get to the office or when you get to school, college, or whatever. At lunchtime, when you get set to leave, when you get through the door, just taking stock. Hey, how do I feel right now? What's going on with my body right now? Do I feel drained? Do I feel energized? What's happened since the last time I checked in? And it doesn't have to be a 20-minute process either. It can be 60 seconds of just taking a moment as you're pulling up the car outside the house. How do I feel right now? How do I feel about what's about to happen? What do I feel is about to happen? Am I future pacing anything for the time to come? Am I still feeling drained from what has happened just now? Is there anything that I can jot down to start course correcting what I have been doing during the day to move me forward more positively? Again, this doesn't have to be a 20-minute process. It can be a 60 seconds, stop, check in with yourself and ask yourself, how do I feel right now? How do I feel since the last time that I checked in? And is there anything I can do right now to tune myself up before the next period of time?
I mean, I suspect there's going to be an element of self-healing there. I mean, just by bringing that to your awareness, you know, it's like, I feel, you know, I've just had a rough day or whatever, I feel crappy and it's not serving me. Right. 60 seconds is up and I need to go in and feed the kids, feed partner, feed whoever, do whatever, you know, and get on with my day, right? I mean, is almost bring it to the awareness. That is kind of, that's going to be key. And then it almost then saying, well, the subconscious mind will start the process by the fact of bringing it.
100%, 100%, 100%.
So we don't need
we
to
want to be in
50 goals, right?
We don't necessarily, and for some people that might be part of the healing process, but if we just get obsessed with what I need to do, what I need to do, what I need to do, that can sometimes distract us from being present enough and to allow the healing to happen. I started working with a functional medicine doctor recently, reason being that I'm going to be 40 this year. I started looking at the clock tick. I was like, well, let me get some blood work and see what's going on inside, because, you know, we're getting into the danger zone now, right? And one of the things that Dr. Pepper said, shout out Dr. Pepper, by the way, is, you know, once you just start to take care of some of these key foundational things, the body will look after itself. So for me, for example, it was like a couple of things with my gut lining. So we're doing a few things, some enzymes and stuff to, like, you know, bolster that up. But then other little, tiny little things, because I didn't have any big things, there's little things niggly here and there. They're going to take care of themselves once you take care of that foundational thing. Once you start bringing awareness into your experience, it's going to be very difficult for negativity to creep up and have you making unconscious choices about how you're talking to people, because you're more aware. Once you've got that awareness, it's going to be a lot trickier for people that are negative to slip into your life, because you're going to be more aware of how you feel, more sensitive to how you feel about people coming in. And then you can start to bring some discernment into the mix as well. But awareness, without it, we're going to be very stuck. But I think it's important for people to understand that awareness in and of itself isn't going to do all of the work, but it's an essential component to any work that is going to be done to heal and move forward.
Interesting. Even you call it the danger zone. I'm 43, so I get it. You know, it's the midlife opportunity has come upon me too. You know, it's
exactly
great, but it's yeah. I mean, is it a danger zone or is it a zone of opportunity? Right? Who knows?
I mean, for me, I use the term playfully, but you're right in terms of the quality of the words that we use. But it's just, you know, the body moving through different phases, and in different phases, it operates in different ways. And if I just drifted unconsciously into my 40s without taking care of the fact that, hanging on, you know, I need to switch up how I'm exercising, because my heart maybe is going to need to do things differently. My metabolism might not work the same. So do I want to be here for another 40, 50, 60 years? Or do I want to unconsciously drift into unhealth, you know? So bringing that level of awareness into a big point of shift, that's what I was looking for as I was going into this new decade of my life. And I do that quite religiously.
What does the future hold for Dan? What's in the pipeline? What's coming up?
Well, I'm really, really committed to my goal to be a full-time philanthropist in the next 3 to 5 years. That's a really big goal for me. So even how I'm approaching entrepreneurship, the kind of things I'm getting involved in, more legacy plays, that's what I'm really into. On the personal development, you know, being of service to people, moving more into film. Like I said, we're moving more full-time into filmmaking. I do have potentially more booky stuff coming out, but I think the full-time philanthropy and film, those are 2 things I'm really excited about over the next few years as being a key focus for me.
How does that serve you, and how does that serve others, do you think?
Well, the philanthropy is something I care about because I'm not, so I practice something called entrepreneurial philanthropy. So even the projects that I'm involved in now, they're not about handouts, they're about empowering. So I do a lot of stuff in West Africa at the moment because I did some stuff with the government out there when I was purely a consultant. And like we're building like factory plants, but we're building co-ops with the local community where we're training them and we're teaching them how to use things and go off and do them, look after things for themselves, and teaching them how to grow and scale those industries that we're bringing and helping them to tie in with other local micro industries as well, bringing in microfinances to support with stuff so they can be independent, not waiting for someone to come and give them a handout every 5 seconds. So that's kind of the kind of stuff that I'm involved in on the philanthropy side, stuff that actually empowers people, starts to bring more choice and opportunity into their area so that they can actually be an example to other areas and inspire them to do good things too.
It's interesting. You sort of almost there's an element of giving back is kicked in already for you.
Mm-hmm.
Is that sort of almost a sort of gratitude cycle, if you like, or is that a, you know, I've received and I must give? Do you think that's just part of your being?
I think it's definitely part of how I was raised. Contribution is always a value that my parents instilled into me, and I'm very grateful to them for that. That we are here because of what we can give, not what we can take, and not from a completely self-flagellating perspective, but it actually does feel good. Scientifically, it's been demonstrated. It feels good to help other people. So there is a very powerful payoff from that. And so that's something I've had the opportunity to spend, you know, decades now feeding into and experiencing. And so it's a big driving factor to what I do. And it's the same kind of value that I want to install into my kids too.
Mm. It's, yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful habit to have, you know, why not? You know, it's about giving back to others, I suppose. Talk to us about your podcast. I mean, you are a fellow podcaster. You're a veteran, I think, is probably the better way of putting it. But what
yeah, we were podcasting before it was sexy terrible, what we Pete, you know. But yeah, so I originally started my first podcast, Do It With Dan. Initially, it was a conversation I had with a mate of mine, and we were just talking about books that we enjoyed. And we used to have these really interesting conversations, but like, we should just record podcasts about this. And then when I made the decision to shutter my other business and move into being of service full time, I was like, well, I've already got all the branding done. I already had like the intro thing done, and I already had the domain and everything. So I was like, I'm just going to call it Do It With Dan. And so that was the podcast. And what it was is I wanted to do speaking. And I kind of understood that it's highly unlikely that someone's going to give me an opportunity to speak before I've demonstrated that I can speak. And so what I immediately did was started putting my own events and videoing them and taping them so I could get my own reel and get my own tape, and so I can go and get my own, and did the podcast. And so that's what started with that. And then I think 2 years ago now, we started to find that the guests that we're having were kind of moving into 2 different arenas, and we had more entrepreneurship based guests. And so we peeled off and started the Beyond Success podcast, which is more purely for entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship.
There's a real key, and I suppose to sort of, for me, there, and what you just said, to highlight to anyone, I suppose, is just getting started. And it's something I know that it came up for me too, and that, you know, hence what the podcast came about. Reading Think and Grow Rich, that was formed out of 505 interviews with successful business people, came the book Think and Grow Rich. So I can either get a degree, or I can moan about it, or I can go and interview 505 successful people and see what happens, right? You know,
and see what happens. Exactly.
You know, I'm a building engineer by trade, and I just happen to stick a microphone and say, start with that. Start with talking about it. Same with yourself. Start by actually getting on screen, you know, and getting your sexy out, right? You know, and saying, just do it again, repetition. And then suddenly, lo and behold, you're what, 5 books in there, you've podcasts, multiple podcasts, film reels, all the rest. So if someone says, you know, someone were to call you lucky, how would that go down with you?
I think in the book, The Richest Man in Babylon, there's a whole chapter dedicated to the idea of, have you read that book, George S. Clayton's book, The Richest Man in Babylon?
I don't think so.
It's a good one. Yeah, so that one, what they do is they teach a number of financial lessons through parables based in ancient Babylon. And there's a whole one on the goddess of luck. And it ultimately comes down to, luck is when preparedness meets opportunity. And so have I had some quote unquote lucky turns? No, I've had opportunities that I was resourced to actually meet, you know. All of those opportunities came from how I've showed up, what I've been doing up until that time, and being ready to jump, and also just taking up the opportunity. There's stuff that comes across our desk and comes into our life that we don't actually act on. And then when we wonder why things have shown up the way that they have, it's because you didn't go for it. And so because you didn't go for it, this is where you are. And so, yeah, definitely preparing this meeting opportunity, working on myself consistently, aiming to be ready consistently for what might show up. That's definitely been more present for me than I would say, quote unquote, luck.
Where does your inspiration come from? What inspires you, or what sort of, are you in the shower sort of a guy? Are you up on stage? Are you out traipsing about a forest or in a sea? When do those ideas, that conscious flow, come into play, or unconscious flow, if you like?
I think different things have come in at different times, but one of the principles I love to live by is, if you allow God to use anything to speak to you, then God can use everything to speak to you. And so I actually allow everything, a seemingly insignificant meme that shows up on my Facebook feed or whatever, a conversation with someone, a silly thought in the bath. I do aim to see anything that comes up out of the blue. I do my best to sit with it for a minute and just ask, oh, is there something there? And it could be something for now, it could be something for later. Sometimes it gets jotted down, but I allow everything to be a part of the inspirational process for me.
And do you, I'm curious, because I had a guest that came on and said they then look for three, was it three signs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something's kind of going, I wonder, should I do this? And saying, if I get three signs, then I'll continue with this or something, which actually really worked for them. I'm just curious if other people look for that and saying, do I need is there a certain qualification of saying, if I see a white feather, or if someone wants to use this word or whatever, right? Because we all have our quirks, right?
Yeah, and for me, I think it's important for people to do what they believe in, because their beliefs are going to be the most powerful thing about what's going to work for them. But I would say that in my experience, I look for a gut response. Reason being is, have you ever heard of human design?
Don't think so.
So human design, it's a modality, I think the best way to call it, that was created by this guy called Rahu or something like that. Anyway, there's this whole thing. It's a combination of numerology, astrology, and loads of other things. It's based on your time and date and place of birth, and you get a chart. And based on this chart, you basically fit into one of 5 categories for how your body naturally processes energy. And there's lots of other things that sits under it too. But the groups are the most rare of reflectors, then projectors, then manifestors, and manifesting generators and generators. And basically, based on that grouping, you're going to connect with energy in a different way. And also within that, there's another thing, which is your authority, which is the way that your body naturally connects with the truth of something. So I'm something called a sacral generator, which means that my gut response, my in the moment gut response, is the best indicator for my connection to truth. Now, all of this stuff could be poppycock, but I found for myself and for the people around me and the people that we take through this process of using this authority, it's very powerful for us to bring the mind out of the decision-making process and allow the body to be a really clear indicator of what to do. And so for some people, they might look for those 3 signs. That person might be an intuitive type, a splenic type. So some kind of sign or intuition is really powerful for them. Some people are better off talking it out and feeling good about something after talking it out. For me, it's my gut response. So if I get like a gut response, like a full body yes about something, then I go with it. And if I don't have it, I wait until I have that before I move on something.
Do you have any examples of what in your journey that, certain things that a gut response has been key to a change in your development, or an example maybe?
What I'll actually give is, I'll give an example of a client of mine who actually is not a gut response like me. They're actually something called a solar plexus, which should wait for something to pass. I should sleep on it, give an hour and come back to it and see how they feel. And he got offered a great opportunity to he invests in theatre. That's what he does. And he was already invested in one theatre production with this person. It was going very well. And the person goes, oh, I've got another one. And he didn't give it time. Like, his immediate thing was, yeah, I'm excited about it, I'm going to do it. And then like a couple of days later, it was like, oh, I don't know if I should have done that. And it ended up tanking. He ended up losing a lot of money. Now, in that instance, had he said, hey, yeah, let me sit with that, give me a couple of days, he would have actually arrived at his actual answer. It doesn't really feel like a fit for me. And he wouldn't have pulled the trigger on it. He went with his gut which isn't his natural way of flowing with things. And boom, Bob's your Uncle Sally's run. He ends up losing a bit of money. Me personally, I have followed this way of being for many years now. So it's going to be very difficult for me to find a time when it hasn't necessarily worked for me. And for the most part, it does work for me because that's how I live my life. But ultimately, it comes down to, again, knowing yourself, knowing you, and knowing what's in your groove, and also seeing if this works for you. For some people, this model of being isn't going to be the way that they're going to be in the most groove. But I think there's a period of experimentation. And again, we're looking at 24 years of me playing and experimenting with stuff. And so I'm kind of attuned to what works for me and what doesn't. When something comes in, I can normally say, this is probably not for me, or that feels like it can be something that fits in. And so I'm well practiced in that. For someone who's just at the beginning of their journey, who was in the middle of their journey, take the time out to experiment and see what works for you and what doesn't. When I was getting used to using this gut response, my ex-wife, she's obsessed with this stuff. She's the one that actually introduced it to me. She had me always ask myself, like in a restaurant, look at the menu and see what feels good in my body. Or when I think about someone that I really like, notice how your body feels. When you think about someone that you don't really like that much, notice how your body feels. When you know something is a hell yes beforehand, notice how your body feels. When something you know is not for you, like I don't want to wax my bum, that doesn't really feel good to me. Notice how your body feels, and it starts to give you that very clear indication for you to be able to know when you're in tune and when you're out of tune.
And I mean, that's fundamental to any sort of form of muscle testing, right? Kinesiology.
Yeah,
it is. It's
exactly.
How's my body reacting? And if you get funny feeling, tense muscle, sore head, whatever, right? It's just you connecting to your body.
Exactly. But again, people overlook the simplicity of like a quick muscle test. Whether you use this one or I think the finger pulling one is probably the easiest one to self muscle test. It was like, does it work for you? Okay, that one works for me. Well, check the response. Do it with things that you know. Like they always get you say, is my name Pete? Is my name Dan? Yeah. Okay, cool. Right. Is it Helen? No, it's not. Oh, well, my name's not Helen, I guess. Right. But getting used to these things and starting to build a little toolbox that you can pop into and pull out things that are going to support you on your journey.
And that's the thing, I suppose. And for me, what you've said there, I suppose, is fundamental. Say, if it works for you, use it.
Yeah.
Who cares if turning a door handle 3 times works for you? Fill your boots. Go for it.
Go for it. It's like, we had all these divisions that have been happening in the world over the last couple of years. People saying, oh, this and that. Have you got this? Have you got that? Have you done this to your body? Have you not done that to your body? And like, what happened just letting people do what works for them? People getting mad at people falling out with people, instead of us being more concerned with what's going to work for me and can I allow other people to do what's going to work for them. Because I think it's Dr. Bruce Lipton, he did the numbers on this. 98% of health conditions are actually generated more from our belief system and our body's response to a belief system than a genetic predisposition to it. There's a small percentage, there's some things that are genetic dispositions, but for most things like that happen to us, it's the body responding to a belief system that sits within our mind that says this is going to happen or this can happen. When we start to honor those belief systems and start to build habits and behaviors in that honor them, we'll actually find that we're less impacted by some of these negative things and actually more powerfully able to move forward. Do what works for you.
I would say to the listeners, I mean, a great gentle read on that is Louise Hayes. You can heal your life.
Yep.
Body, heal your life.
Yeah, heal your
Confuse myself there because it's got
heal your thinking, heal your life, or something like that. I know the one you're talking about.
Here somewhere, but yeah, it's
where she talks about.
Yeah, it's that thing: sore neck, sore body, whatever. It's a method, and listen, it's going to work for people, and it does work for people. It's a phenomenal, successful book, and it's that connecting and saying and I do like that idea of that concept that is, pain is a symptom; it's often not the cause.
Yeah.
So fair enough, take a drug or do whatever you need to do to get rid of the pain, but please do not
deal with the cause.
Let's
watch it come back.
Yeah. How close are you to your true self, do you think, Dan?
You know, That's one of those questions that I don't know. I do my best to tune in to what I believe to be my true self, but I think that's one of those questions that at this level of consciousness, we're going to struggle to get the full read on.
Yeah.
Right. There's just so much happening. Even when we look at the fact that we only use 5-6% of our brain power at most, there's so much going on. And when you think about the fact that even some of the memories, is it 50% of the memories that we're leaning on as memories aren't even real, right? They've been distorted in some way. So even what I believe to be my true self against the backdrop of the memories I'm using to qualify what true self is, half of those are distorted. So do I want to spend my time like wondering if I'm next to my true self or doing my true self or being my true self, or do I want to spend time tuning into what feels like it's the closest right now and what I can do going forward to keep attuning myself to that feeling, knowing that I may not get it right, but doing my best anyway.
That's, I love that. I love that approach, because I think it's just, it's again, but it's coming back to it. And I know, I mean, you're coming across quite a kinesthetic person, so there's a lot of feeling, a lot of, guttural instinct there as well, I suppose. But it's accepting that we're always tweaking, and our truest version, if you believe it, our truest version is lying underneath, and you sort of checking in with yourself is just sort of course correcting, rather than sort of going completely off on a tangent. So, okay, I went off a bit, but let's check in with myself, meditate, ask yourself feeling question, whatever. Then that allows us to get back to maybe who we truly are underneath, maybe.
Maybe. And the key word there being maybe. I think when we understand the complete lack of certainty that we have, and the low probability of us ever having true certainty about anything, it allows life to be an adventure that we can enjoy the journey of, versus this thing that we're constrained and stressed out trying to perfect.
Is pressure for diamonds, or is it just bad planning? Do you enjoy a bit of pressure, a bit of a deadline, bit of a...
There's a difference between pressure and suffering, right? The diamond, the diamond isn't in a state of suffering on its journey to becoming a diamond. It's going through the process of becoming a diamond. And so, when people use that example, it's like, yeah, but the diamond isn't, oh my God, I've got to become a diamond. It's just on the journey of becoming a diamond, and it allows nature to go through its process of taking it through to being a diamond. Putting pressure on ourselves, or allowing ourselves to be pressured to the point of distress, is not leaving us in a conducive space to even enjoy the pleasure of being a diamond. We're just in a state of stress and probably getting sick in the process. So I firmly believe that I continue to resource myself for my nervous system to be able to handle more, because I seek to be more, but not to the point of distress. One of my Danisms is push your edge, but not your buttons. Don't push yourself so much into the point of pressure that you're not unable to function or even enjoy the fruits of the pressure that you have been able to handle.
It was that thing, because quite often, like, asking people, are they driven by pain and pleasure? And I think it's naive to say we're totally driven by pleasure, because the body also recognizes deadlines and pain too. It's getting that happy medium, and I think that is the thing. That's a tweaking process. It's whatever works best for you, and maybe it's different. Maybe it's different things. And when we're in our zone of genius in one area but not another, it's like, yeah, on this one I need a deadline. The other thing I'll take all the time I can get and create as much as I can.
And that's the thing as well. Setting yourself up with a life that operates on your own terms means that you can actually probably more readily, right, create a situation whereby the people, places, things around you actually support you living life on your own terms. So, okay, I need deadlines for this, but I don't need them for that. Well, when you've got agency in your life, you can ensure that there aren't people, places, and things putting deadlines on you when you don't want them, but then you're supported with the deadlines in the area that you do.
It's such and I suppose this was one of for me, the most interesting thing learning about dyslexia for myself, and this thing, because I mean, there's a sliding scale with dyslexia, and I think we're all on every scale in some shape or form, but one of the things, sort of the way the clinician that actually diagnosed me was, it's saying it's not that you can't, it's just it won't bring you leisure or pleasure. But that was a really interesting way of putting it. It's saying,
I love that.
I can't read or write. It's just I'm unlikely to sit down unless I'm clear of mind, etc., and just do it for fun. Some people do it as a method of clearing. I don't, because my brain is working at a different speed to my hand, and as a result, it's That's
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of it's knowing that. And I suppose a point there, and what I was picking up with yourself is that aspect of seeing what you're good at, identifying what you're good at, and maybe the things that you're not. You know, and you may be able to identify that yourself, or you might need to lean on a sibling or somebody you know that you trust and say, what am I really good at that I'm maybe not seeing, right?
I think it was there's a book by Vadim Zealand called Tufty, and in the book he pushes this whole idea of stop trying to work on your weaknesses and focus on your strengths. Like, don't bother working on your weaknesses. Just focus on your strengths, and they will outshine any weaknesses that you do have, and actually allow you to be in a position where you can exchange your strengths with other people's strengths to fill in for any gaps that you do have. And I think that's just a much more effective way to live at life. That doesn't mean you run away from things that you can't do. It's not putting that pressure on yourself to try and be an expert in areas where you don't have capacity, especially those areas where you can just hire in, right? And that energy could be focused on you instead, improving on those skills that you do have to make you an overall more effective person. I've lived by that principle, and I find it to be very powerful for me.
That's really simple, really beautiful, isn't it? You know, the work on your strengths, and the weaknesses or the other things will just naturally fall away. It'll fall out of your habit, right?
So why do we have this delusion that we have to be amazing at everything? Yeah. Well, there's going to be stuff that you're just not that good at, and that's okay. What about if we took that energy back into loving ourselves, having compassion for ourselves, and celebrating the things that we can do well? Now, if you've got a particularly challenging challenge area that actually disempowers you completely, then yes, by all means, if it's holding you back, put some work into it, but not to the point of it actually pulling away from the pleasure you're experiencing, the things that you are great at, and maybe even contributing that to other people who could be who could benefit from your skills also.
I love that, because it's like, I suppose, whether it's a book or a course or whatever, we get, you know, I say we, the royal we, you know, it's like people get head up and saying this has to suit everyone, has to do everything, and saying, well, listen, even, you know, it's, what have we got? We're the guts of 8 billion people on this big lump of rock we're all living on. It's like, if you even just appeal to 0.1% of the population, that's still, if I've done my math right, that's still 8 million people.
That's a lot of people.
If you sold a course, a book or whatever to 8 million people, you would be a very
yeah, you'd be a successful person.
I was like, so you don't need everyone. You just, I mean, you don't even need one. In fact, you could probably do with 0.0001% of the population. You know, it's like a lot of clients. You know, Facebook lets you have 5,000 friends. You know 5,000 people? Do you? You do get
there is a strategy around that we use when I'm working with business owners and entrepreneurs. It's called the 100 true fans rule. Was it 1,000 true fans? 1,000 true fans rule. That you can have $1 million business with just 1,000 clients. It's really easy. And most people, you know, their needs could be probably met with a 6-figure business that you could probably do that with 100 people. 100 people that you can serve at the highest level, solving a problem. You're good. You don't even need that 1% of the world. You just need 100 or even like 1,000 or even 100 people, depending on, you know, what your needs are and the model and the problem that you're able to solve. But scaling it down to something that's more manageable, what I call mystically realistic, versus, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Oh, all these people. It's okay. Well, what are my needs really? Right. Okay. A couple $100,000 gets me out of this job and allows me and my family to have some financial flexibility, if not freedom. All right. Well, what problems can I solve? What problems exist in the world? How can I liberate people from a place of pain? Of these, which one's got the biggest price point that I can connect it to so I can serve the least amount of people in order to get to my goal? Boom, before you know it, you're working a 10-hour week and you're making the money that you need to get to where you want to be. But it doesn't require you to have as many people in the pipeline as you think it does.
And people often don't do the math, right? Because I think I'm going to say Jack Canfield, or one of the guys, has like the $1 newsletter club. You know, for $1 you can get the newsletter, and people go, oh God, what's the point for $1? Yeah, they're like 2 million subscribers. It's like 2 million a month. It's like, are you still not bothered? You know?
Are you still not bothered? And, you know, simple ideas like, I'm really fortunate I've got to connect with Jack a couple of times, and I actually just got my invite to his Transformational Leadership Council. I'm going to the first meeting next week. All being well, I'll be brought in as a full member. But even when you look at those guys and how they approach things, you often find it is the simple ideas. Like when you're looking at people at the peak of their game, it's a simple idea. I mean, if you look at sports, Shaq O'Neal couldn't shoot a free throw for his life, but he made a joke about it. But he's 6'7'1", put him in front of the net, and he just needs to go on his tiptoes and he can dunk it. So he just focused on those things that he could do, and he forgot about the free throws. You know, that's not going to get the free throws. Find that one thing that you can start to solve a problem in, and then branch off from there. You know, yeah, right now I've got different businesses, but I had a pillar income at first, and I focused on that pillar income to create the space for me to be able to go out and do other things. And now I can expand, but I'm not using my time and energy. I'm expanding in a way that I've got other people doing a lot of the execution. I mentioned about the projects in West Africa. I haven't been out there for a couple of years, and yet everything's still ticking along nicely. And I spend maybe an hour a week managing things that are helping lots and lots of people. But it started with me having that pillar thing that was focused on, built up, and then grew from there.
And I suppose that is important to anyone to say, you know, this has been a 20+ year process for you.
Yeah. Yes.
Outside of just being a human, you know, the conscious decision to develop, to evolve as well. You know, because I know some people do get sort of going, oh God, I've read 3 books and I'm not changed. What's wrong with me? I'm a failure. No, this is an ongoing. But for people that are, and maybe that haven't found their sexy yet and whatever, I mean, is there sort of simple steps for people to get started here? You know, what is it, do you think people can do to really start them on their journey?
I mean, this is again where my beyond intention paradigm comes in, because it's about developing that level of agency for you to be able to apply in different areas and different situations. But the first thing is accepting responsibility. That's step 1 of beyond intention. Do you accept that you have the power to actually be responsible in your life, or are you still blaming other people, places, and things for where you're at right now? We can't deploy an agency that we've given away through blame in any way, shape, or form. And this can go to real extremes, because there are things that we genuinely can blame other people for, but do we have the capacity to find agency even in those spaces? Because that's going to put us in a real place of power. So I'd say I would have people do a blame audit. That's what I would have them do. Like, where in your life do you apportion blame to others? And how can you start pulling some of that power back? Then start getting clear on how you want to feel, and then start curating your environment to support how you want to feel. But it starts with, I think, being able to accept responsibility for your own life.
Just break that down for us. That's a blame audit. So what would that look like, for example?
So I would say even look at things that are not going the way you want, and ask yourself, honestly, who's responsible for that? Right? Who do you feel in your heart of hearts is responsible? Well, if it wasn't for COVID, you know, I'd still have a job. Right? If it wasn't for Sue down the road, Johnny wouldn't have stepped out on me, and we'd still have a family. You know, like whatever it is, and this doesn't work unless you're honest. You know, we're not going to be looking over their shoulder. They just do it for them, and just take a look, and then you'll start to see. And I actually speak about this in the book. There are different grades that we like to blame. You know, people blame God or the devil. They'll blame society, the people in power, their upbringing, parents, and other things. Like there are different groups that you'll find, and you'll probably find that you lean towards certain groups. But it's again just asking those things that aren't really working out right. Who in my heart of hearts do I think is responsible? Okay, how can I start pulling some of that power back?
It's so key, isn't it? It takes a lot. Does it take self-awareness, or just it takes self-discipline? Maybe it's a better way.
I would say it takes readiness to accept that responsibility without then turning the blame inwards. Because this isn't about making yourself to blame. It's accepting the power to move forward.
Yeah.
Compassion is the word I'm looking for. Self-compassion.
Yeah. And compassion, yeah, I suppose, and I suppose for people maybe is not apportioning the blame. It just is.
Yeah.
You just are where you are, and that's
it, and that's okay.
Yeah. Well, it's like, because the human mind, the ego, etc., wants to have a reason, you know, whatever. How's your ego out of interest?
It's a work in progress, definitely.
You get on well with
I
your
kept
ego?
with, yeah, yeah. Most of the time we're getting on okay, but every now and then something funny happens. Like we went out yet this weekend, and yeah, we went out this weekend. We got to the place and we tried to book a table in advance. It didn't work, so we get to the front desk like, hey, we need a table. Person at the front desk wasn't very polite, didn't understand what we're saying. English wasn't her first language. We end up getting what we thought was like a deposit towards a table and went off, and I went to the VIP area. I know the bouncers in the place, so they let me through. They didn't even look at the fact that I didn't have the right thing. A woman who doesn't recognize me, excuse me, you're in the wrong place. You didn't. So, and I could feel myself like bubbling up, like, do you know how much money I'm going to spend here today? So, oh, this is really like, she doesn't care. So, like, nothing's going to come from me going down that road I could see myself starting to go down. And instead, we just dealt with the misunderstanding. And it was all taken care of in a couple of minutes. But I could feel the bubbling up wanting to happen. So for me, there are certain situations where it's easier for me to catch and laugh at it. And there's certain situations where I have to be a bit more on point, shall we say, with the ego wanted to pop up and have it say in a less than graceful fashion. Definitely.
Well, it's great. I mean, to be able to identify it as well is it's amazing. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that the ego will be present in some areas more than others.
Just what it is. And it serves a function, right? And one of my mates, Mira Kelly, she wrote a great book called Beyond Past Lives, which I do recommend to everyone. Sold 20 million copies. Really, really great book. And one of the things she says, like, the ego isn't to be destroyed or to be overcome, it's to be integrated in a loving way. And when you can do that, you're going to be a much more powerful person.
Well, it's funny you say that, because it was something I've been really trying to focus in on in the last couple of months, is about positive ego. Because I have, if anyone's been, this guilty of saying, well, the ego's with you for life. So the best thing to do is get to a solid working relationship where you can take the piss out of each other and you can
yeah.
It's always a sort of there's always a tension where it's saying, what if the ego could be employed in a positive way? The likes, you say, well, okay, it's my goal, my aspiration is to have the most successful coaching business, so that I could have, as you were saying, some of your philanthropy projects into Africa or wherever you're doing it, saying, yeah, I want to hit 100,000, a million, 10 million, whatever. That's I think that's positive ego deployment. If I'm
I would say so, yeah. I would say so, yeah. So and I think there's also there's also a power to being at peace with the fact that I want it because I want it for me. Like, there's so much power that comes from just accepting I want it so that I can have the big house or the big car. Like, not everybody wants to be a philanthropist, right? I do drive a nice car, right? But I do it for me. You won't see my car on my social media anywhere because I didn't do it to show off to anyone else. I did it for me. I enjoy, but there's times when I drive a bit slower because I say, oh, yeah, I feel good in my car. Do you want to see me drive my car? Yeah. A mate of mine came out to Dubai. We met up here for the Grand Prix November last year. And, we took some Lambos out for the day. He had the Urus, I had a Hurricane. And we're just pissing around and enjoying. You pull up and, we've done well. We're celebrating. We're having a good time. And that's okay. But it's like we chose that we were going to, be a couple of Lambo wankers for the day. And that's something that we wanted to do for ourselves. And it felt good. And we weren't doing it to, you peasants, you can't do this, but we can. It's like we felt like we wanted to celebrate and have fun on the day. And so I think people can pick up on the energy of that, right? People that are doing something because they need to be validated versus someone's doing something because they want to do it. And I think that validation piece is a big differentiator between, like you said, the positive ego and an ego that's wounded and needs healing. It's who are you doing it for? Are you doing it for you? Are you doing it for other people to validate you? And if so, why not do it? You want to go and fly in a private jet? Go and do it if that feels good to you. But tune in. Does it really feel good to you? Are you chasing someone else's idea of what's going to feel good?
And I suppose, that's an element of life, isn't it? It's, at least try. Give it a whirl. It might be. You know, it's like,
Exactly.
yeah, an afternoon in a Lambo is enough for me, or actually, yeah, I'm genuinely in the market for it, or you know,
Yeah.
I really don't want the feedback. So I like the car, I
Hmm.
like the feedback. Therefore, no.
Hmm.
But I mean, my late father always used to say, "It's like I only take the opinion of someone who's tried. If they haven't tried it,
100%.
you know, it's
Don't go
like,
for it. Mm.
but what can they teach you? You know, mentors generally,
Hmm.
you know, the difference between a coach and a mentor. A mentor theoretically has been
Just
there and
been there.
done it.
Hmm.
You know, a coach is going to sit with you and saying, "Let's do it together." You know, and
Hmm.
you know that is the power of experience. That's, you know, that's
Mm.
huge in itself, right?
Agreed. Agreed. Agreed.
You know, who's been really significant in your life? I suppose who's sort of really sort of stands out.
Oof. I don't know if any one person stands out. I've been blessed to have a lot, and I continue to have a lot of mentors and guides and people who've supported me on my journey in different ways. Um, and in different areas of my life, I really believe in specialization. And so I've got people that I lean on for more help when it comes to connecting with others and different areas of business and so on. Um, but I would say over the last year, Yannick Silva has been a really, really big guide for me. He's opened up a lot of doors and helped me get access to some of the other mentors that have been coming in and give me a lot of support. Um, I had the real pleasure of going to Richard Branson's private island last year. I'm actually going again in 10 weeks time this year. That was really great because it's been, I mean, we Brits, I mean, he's like the entrepreneur guy, right? That we was looked up to growing up, right? And so getting to see someone like that in action and see how they do things and how they really commit to contribution, that was a really big motivating factor for me. So I've got a few that are weaved in and out, but I'd say Yannick probably is front of mind at the moment because a lot of the movements that I'm making have been based on doors that he's opened up and conversations that we've had over the last year or so.
And it sounds like, I mean, you know, you seek actively both coaching, but then
Mentorship,
with
yeah.
coaches, you know,
I spend multiple six figures a year on my personal development.
well, it's great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And not everyone gets that. So like, right, I did a course back in 19 something. So that's me,
No,
right? It's like, no. I
no,
mean,
no.
and you know, there's
I'm
certain
always on
courses
it.
I want to be on, as you say, it's six figures plus just for that course. And people are
Yeah.
going, you're mad, you're mad. You're like, well, okay. Well, if that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if £100,000 course leads to £1 million of business, is that a good return? Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, then why would I not?
And one of the things I found as well is, you know, there's some things you pay, you know, 20, 30, 40 grand on or whatever. And the thing itself hasn't necessarily been the upside, but the people that you've been in the room with has been the upside.
Yeah.
Or the inspiration that you've got from being in the room, or even just being in the energy of that space has been the thing. And so I do my best not to be frightened off by the price tag of personal development. I don't just go and spunk. I do still look for, you know, is there something I can get from this? Do these people have the capacity to deliver what they're supposed to deliver? Like I've got a coach at the moment who's helping me learn to communicate my message on stage a bit more effectively. And, you know, wasn't a cheap investment. It was a heavy investment. But again, not only do I get the time with him, he also opens up doors for me. He's very big with Success Resources, so he's going to help me get on Success Resources stages and so on and so forth. So again, there's different upsides that can come from it. But yes, I think looking at the ROI is important, but also the ROI beyond just the course. How is your name going to be spoken of, right? As a person who's serious and is committed to what they're doing, or someone who's not really prepared to put up the price tag for something to be done. I know that when people talk about me, I'm someone they know, oh, Dan's serious. Like if he says he's doing it, he's doing it.
Yeah.
You know, he's ready to invest in himself. And so that does actually open up doors, and also means that when conversations are had and my name's in it, I'm like, yeah, you know, bit of a flake, you know. so I think that's part and parcel of the investment also.
Mm. That's true. So true. It's being as willing to invest in yourself and has everything really, I suppose, is key for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sounds like you certainly do a lot of listening or reading. I mean, what is your learning
Oh yeah.
style?
So I make my way through a minimum of 4 books a month, and making my way through those books might be audio and it might be like reading. So I keep things on the Kindle. I've got physical, but because I travel a lot, the Kindle's a really good tool for me to be able to just have an entire library with me at all times. I miss having a full library like yours there, but again, my time's split between 3 different countries, and so it's actually a bit more effective for me to have just the Kindle for the main library, but then I do have books in boxes in different countries or whatever. But that's that. I've been enjoying YouTube a lot more over the last, I would say, year, spending a bit more time on YouTube, learning that way too. But I also love experience, sort of getting my hands dirty and getting into it and seeing how things go. But certainly learning theory through books and through YouTube has been a big one for me.
Leisure and pleasure for you, what does that look like?
I love to travel. I do enjoy traveling. I've actually, part and parcel of some shifts I've been making over the last month and a half going into 2023 is actually building my life more consistently around the things that I actually do find pleasurable. So making specific time, regardless of which of the 3 places, Mexico, Italy, and Dubai, the 3 places I spend the most time. Like, do I have a salsa class I can go to once a week in those 3 places? Do I have a jiu-jitsu gym? Do I have somewhere I can go and get on the golf range once a week? Do I have space for me to be able to go and have my nature walks? Do I have access to water to go and have peaceful time? My working week is 3 days. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays are the only days that I do actually work things. So those are important. My Monday is normally self-care. So I'll normally find a spa somewhere, have quiet time. Friday's normally reflection on the week that's gone behind. Most of the time when I'm with my family in Mexico, then weekends tend to be like family time as well.
Well, and guilty pleasure for you? Do you have any?
Probably got a few. Probably got a few. I say cheeky Netflix or an Amazon Prime show every now and then. I do tend to just absorb them really quickly, and my day off might be disappeared, consuming an entire season of something. I'd say that, yeah, definitely would be for me, like a cheeky show that catches me. Yeah, I get stuck with that.
Every time it's like wine, chocolate, cigars, TV, whatever. It's like, I don't care how high up the ladder goes when people talk about guilty pleasure, smile from here to here, and it's.
I don't find, I mean, cigars, I smoke cigars, celebrations and birthdays. So I've got quite a decent little, in fact, everywhere I've got a little humidor that's got some sticks in there, but I don't tend to smoke every week. You know, one of my mates here, he'd go every week a couple of times, but I don't go with him all the time. But we'll go and have like something big's happened. I pulled off a big little play. Yeah, mate, when you're going this week, I'll go and sit down with you and have it. And also we're spending a lot of time in Mexico, to get proper Cubans as well. So I've got decent ones. Wine, I think, is just an important part of life. So I'm not going to call that a guilty pleasure. You know, glass of wine's important for the soul, definitely. And I'm not really into sweets, but I do eat dark chocolate. I have some dark chocolate every now and then.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, I mean, if you were to try and describe your fire in your belly, then Dan, how would you describe it?
Oh, right now, and for me, it's a transient. It's what feels potent at the time. Right now, I've got quite a big project I'm working on with my brother that I'm really excited about, and so I'm jizzy jazzed about getting that over the line. That's going to open up a lot more doors in terms of what we can do in that same field of healthcare. So I'm really, really excited about growing that business. We literally just this morning, I got some images from another factory we just opened in Sierra Leone. I'm really excited about expanding that. We're going to get a generator and start expanding that. So I'm really, really, really excited about that at the moment. I'd say those are 2 things that are really high up for me that in this moment I'm really excited about and feeling jizzy jazz with.
If you were to summarize that, your fire in your belly in 1 word, what would it be?
Completion is the word that came up.
Nice. Like it.
Yeah, completion is the first word that came up. Yeah.
Tell us, Dan, where can people learn more about you? Where can they follow you, track you down, hunt you down, stalk you, any of the above?
At dreamwithdan.com, easiest place to find me, dreamwithdan.com.
And who's your tribe? Who's your people? Who you're going to be able to serve and serve best?
I generally find that people who have made some steps on their journey towards getting to where they want to be, but are finding that they don't really know what's got them stuck not being there, they're the people that tend to get something from where I am. Newbies on their journey won't get as much from me. They'll get some support, but I'm probably not going to be your primary person. But someone who spent time working on their mindset, working on their spiritual development, or even their hustle side of things, that are finding themselves in a sticking point, you'll normally find that something that we've got will get you over that little hump and across the finish line.
Beautiful. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to leave with our listeners today, Dan?
If there's anything, it's enjoy the ride. None of us are getting out of this alive, so don't take it so seriously.
What's your plans for your 40th? Do you have any?
No, but I've got a lot of sisters, so I'm leaving it to them. It's one of the thing about not having a missus anymore. It's like I don't have anyone who's obligated to make my birthday special, but, but I've got a lot of sisters, so I'm sure they'll do something. And if not, I guess not. But that's it. My plan is to be surprised by what happens, even if what happens is nothing.
Well, worst case, you can do 40 hours of Netflix and treat yourself, you know?
Yeah, worst case.
Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been a real conversation. It's gone all sort of
Loved it.
So I loved it. So thank you. And yeah, until the next time, Dan, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for having me.